You don't drink from the bottle. The bottle drinks from you. You don't laugh when it's empty. The empty laughs at you. And I promise she'll leave you, though you've heard it all before. This time you'll be crying as you watch her close the door. You don't drink from the bottle. The bottle drinks from you. You don't laugh when it's empty. The empty laughs at you. You're in a room and it's empty. Your bottle's on the floor. If you could get up and go, you'd go and get some more. You don't drink from the bottle. The bottle drinks from you. You don't laugh when it's empty. The empty laughs at you. Now you're just barely breathing as a tear rolls down your face. In your grave you'll be lonely. Your life was a disgrace. Your life was a disgrace. You don't drink from the bottle. The bottle drinks from you. You don't laugh when it's empty. The empty laughs at you. The empty laughs at you.
Aboriginal people have an intolerance for alcohol. Now, that is a belief that has caused a storm of controversy this week after this information was found on a Northern Manitoba Fishing Lodge's website. The owner has since apologized and removed the offensive remarks, saying it was something that his company published 15 years ago. But that belief is still out there. We have heard from people who have suggested that Aboriginal people are missing an enzyme or are genetically predisposed to addiction. We've had people Facebooking us, writing us, attaching different documents for us to read. What does science say? Dr. Joel Kettner is an associate professor at the University of Manitoba's Faculty of Medicine, and he's here to set the record straight. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Kettner.
You're welcome. I don't know whether I'll set the record straight because some of the forces behind this may not change their views or their behaviors based on information or science, but I'll do the best I can.
Is there any truth to the idea that Aboriginal people have an intolerance for alcohol?
Well, I think the short answer is no. The question that is being put here is really about Aboriginal people, but I would like to just turn it around for a moment and wonder how people would react if the question that was put on the table was, is there a genetic basis for Caucasian Europeans to colonize other countries, hire Aboriginal guides, and then spread information that is extremely harmful, stereotypic, and really contributes to the ongoing and underlying problems of the social determinants of health.
So, do any cultural groups have genetic intolerances for alcohol? To widen it out.
So if we look at our observations about problems related to alcohol, we do see differences that may be related to geographic, cultural, ethnic, and racial characteristics. But what those really boil down to in almost all scientific analyses are the social circumstances and social conditions, whether it's the experiences within a family or community or at a larger level in society. There are many, for example, indigenous populations around the world that have been colonized and oppressed by settlers, in which we have seen the same patterns of poverty, of poor housing, of disenfranchisement, all of which there is increasing evidence that these are the factors that lead to poor health, to poor individual health, poor social health, and poor community health. And these are what we need to focus our attention on. There will always be theories and research that will try to explain some of this in the way of genetics, as was the case in Germany in the 30s, as was the case in the United States, with comparing Negro brains and white brains.
And it's so dangerous and it's so misused. And it's so upsetting that we even have to clarify. But if I told you, truthfully, this is in response directly to the fact that on this point, people were attaching articles for us to read.
Yeah, and and this is what probably we should be focusing our attention on is when we look at the experience of the residential schools and other aspects of history in this country, we need to continue to educate ourselves. And we also need to understand that we can't just look back and say, let's hope this never happens again, because this is evidence that there is still much work to do in combating what I will just call racism. Mm-hmm. Whether we call it prejudice or stereotyping, it's all forms of the same thing. And from a public health perspective, these are extremely important factors and determinants of the health of our communities, and not just for those who are the victims of it, but for the whole society. And there's increasing evidence of that, and that is certainly what I believe.